So that's where we get to all this stuff. So the bulk of this is cultivating the self as crisis leader. Now this, you'll see some things on the screen and some things I'm going to talk about. They're my own theory that I worked on my master's, but it's based in solid research that other primary researchers have done. So what I want to go through is there's 4, this helps me remember it, maybe it'll help you remember it. There are 4 essential orientations that you need to have to be a crisis leader, and this comes from lots and lots of research on what makes a good crisis leader. I boiled it down to make it simple because when I'm talking I can't remember more than 4 things. So I boiled it down to 4 things, and this is really the core of it. First of all, how you need to be with yourself, and this one's not written down on the slide, although I'll cover it later, is you need to be self-aware and you need to be able to self-manage. It is absolutely foundational in order to do the others. Your orientation to others needs to be an orientation of empathy and compassion. Your orientation in the present and how you are in the present needs to be one of flexibility, and in order to move into the future, you need to have optimism. So those are the core ingredients. If you had just those 4 things, you'd be a pretty good crisis leader, and most of the other things hook into or relate to that. Now each one of those things that I just named are also emotional intelligence competencies, and I want to show you how those hook in. This is just the model that I work with. There are many models. This is the EQI 2.0 model of emotional intelligence, and I realize it's probably too small for you to read all of the small words, but what I want to highlight for you when you get a chance to look at the other slides in the app, each one of those orientations that I've listed here ties into emotional intelligence theory. So first of all, you have self-awareness and self-management. You'll see they show up in 3 out of the 5 dimensions of this model. Shows up in self-perception, and then self-expression, as well as decision-making. Empathy is in the interpersonal category, and then flexibility and optimism are in the stress management category. Now there's a lot of overlap there because there's also, in decision-making, you've got self-management, but flexibility is connected to decision-making. And there's a lot of interconnection between all of these, so please don't think of it as absolutes, but it's a model that can help you think about how it's all connected. Now the good thing about emotional intelligence is that it can be changed. And for that, I am really grateful. When I first went into grad school, the program that I was in was known for being really touchy-feely. In fact, that's almost why I didn't go to it. I was all set between 2 programs, and then I had a conflict that came up with the other program, and I decided I was unable to attend that program. And so I chose this one, and I was kind of like, okay, it's the touchy-feely program. I'm just going to have to go through it. But it's good. It's all good. So I got into the program, and people were we were rating each other in my class. And you had to score each other, and it was an emotional intelligence assessment of each other. And we went through that when we first met. We went through that like 2 or 3 months after we'd been meeting for a while. My classmates rated me as low in empathy. I was crushed. I'm full of empathy. I ooze empathy. I thought, how can they see I'm not empathetic? I was just absolutely shocked. So it turns out my lack of empathy is because I wasn't showing it, and maybe I lacked a little empathy. So I was able to change that. By the time my program was over, everybody was rating me as high in empathy. So I actually watched my empathy scores go up. I have data. I have data in spreadsheets because when people rated me as low in empathy, I'm like, wait a minute. And it was owned feedback. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Not anonymous feedback. This was the hard kind of feedback where I knew everybody who said everything and what number they gave me on every measure. That's actually really hard to take with people you have to look in the eye. And so I knew who said what. So then I'm like, well, let's see here. I'm going to analyze this data. So I created a special spreadsheet with formulas, and it calculated exactly the relationship I had with that person based on how they scored me. And one thing I found, like how well did I know them? The people who knew me really well rated me high on empathy. The people who didn't know me really well rated me very low. So I'm like, that's how I got the clue that maybe I just wasn't showing my empathy, and that maybe I was having trouble connecting with people I don't know well, which gets back to basic personality traits in myself. So I learned something from that, and I was able to grow, and I was able to change. And it didn't come easily. One of the things about emotional intelligence and developing your character is it's a mastery process, And if you've read anything about the process of mastery, you'll know that it is something that can take 10,000 hours in order to gain mastery of a musical instrument, for instance, or of a craft of some sort. And working on yourself is no exception. I don't know that I can say I've put 10,000 hours in yet, which means I've got miles to go before I sleep, but I'm working on it. It is a process that, as you change and grow as a person, it is a process that's called implicit learning. Not something you just go to a bunch of cello classes and take a bunch of classes on how to do it. It takes practice. You have to live it, breathe it. I remember I went to a tango festival in San Francisco, and we danced 10 hours a day, and I think it was 4 days long, maybe 5 days long, and we danced a lot. And we got back, the whole group of us from the local tango community got back, and I was dancing with one of my tango instructors, and he said, "Oh my God, it's like you guys have tango in your bodies. When you do something really intensely and practice it really intensely, it gets into your pores and it becomes part of you." That's the process of mastery. The more you do it, the more you practice, the more you live into it. And what I found is that as you're looking at these kinds of knowledge bits that I'm giving you today, people tend to give them as knowledge bits and they don't carry forth and go into like an extended practice. And I want to give you some tools that will help you do that. The orientation to the self.